Starting off our first news story here, Idaho Capitol votes for fiscal prudence, a new dawn in budget reform. This comes by the Idaho Freedom Foundation by Ronald M. Nate, Ph.D. So diving into the recent developments in the Idaho Capitol that could have significant implications for Idahoans grappling with inflation, taxes, and government overreach. First kind of section starting off here, budget reform. Government spending in Idaho has surged by 54% in the past 4 years. However, a new budget process separating base budgets from growth budgets could curb this trend, leading to lower spending and, consequently, lower taxes. This reform means that the legislature can vote to maintain the function of agencies without necessarily endorsing government expansion. Despite attempts by legislatures to derail this process, the House and Senate have approved the base budget without the large increases, indicating that growth budgets will now be considered separately. But with that said, it's not all been roses. Two sets of bills making their way through the House and Senate. One set followed the budget reform plans, which we just talked about, separating the base budget from line items, while the other set included all spending for each agency in one bill. After a few days of deliberation, the House voted to pass the base budget bills separately from the growth budgets, signaling a preference for budget reform procedure. The Senate followed suit, voting to ratify the budget reform process. However, this week was not without its casualties. The so-called Main Street Caucus, a group of left-leaning Republicans in the House and Senate, suffered significant losses. Their attempts to hijack the Budget Committee were thwarted, and the House Majority Leader Megan Blanksma, a supporter of the hijack plan, was ousted from her office. In summary, this week saw a victory for fiscal responsibility, with the budget reform process promising to curb government spending and waste. We commend those legislatures who stood by their principles and voted for fiscal responsibility despite the pressures they faced. Which, shameless plug before we get any further into the story, and if you haven't already gone over and seen it, I would highly recommend it. I did an interview with Nicholas Kleinworth over at the Idaho Freedom Foundation, and we talked about some of the stuff that is related in this bill, specifically the part about separating the two between bills that are just, hey, we're supporting the status quo, and hey, we want to actually expand a program, and went into discussion and conversation on that, and he goes into that in more depth. So if you think that's a really cool concept, which I know me and John are probably going to talk about a little bit here, I would highly recommend you go over there and check out that interview because I had a really fun time doing that with him, and he kind of expands on those. But with that said, definitely an interesting week with the legislature there based on this report as well and other things I'm hearing. I didn't know all the back-end things going on, but I guess it makes sense. I did hear it was a really crazy week of that the Idaho Freedom Foundation and their supporters and stuff were trying to push to have this separate system, right, where it's like you can vote for the funding to still be there for, I don't know, the highway district or the police, right? But that doesn't mean you have to vote to expand them, to give them more money. And they want that really separated, which I think is a great idea, mainly for the fact that there's so many times we see, even at the federal level, right, that you'll kind of demonize and be like, well, you don't like the police, or you don't support the army, or you don't support X thing, or right, because it's some stinking giant omnibus bill that has a bunch of other things in it. So it's almost, I'm very glad to see that they're trying to do efforts like this. So it's much easier for both me, for the researcher, and also for you, the viewer, and the general public, right, to know, did they vote for increases or not, which I think is a great thing. And so it sounds like, from what I've heard from people, the more left-leaning or the people that prefer to spend a little bit more, we'll put it that way, we're throwing the book at trying to stop this, and it looks like it didn't work out for them from what I'm seeing, and we'll see how the aftermath plays out.
Yeah, you have to watch out for Omnibus Prime. He'll come and get you.
Yeah, I know it's one of John's favorite topics.
Reference.
Thankfully, that one did not fly over my head, ladies and gentlemen. I do know about Transformers.
So, yeah, this is interesting to me. I find it kind of funny, the last bit, the beatdown in the House, the Main Street Caucus, left-leaning Republicans in the House and Senate suffered significant losses. Their attempts to hijack the Budget Committee were thwarted. Things like this make me laugh and make me want to, make me want to think about even running for office just to be in the room when these things happen and be a part of it so I can point and laugh.
Right.
Like, this stuff is ridiculous. It makes me think, or this attempt to thwart things by left-leaning Republicans makes me think about the push for open primaries by Democrats in the state of Idaho. Because this is clearly a group of, I mean, it says left-leaning Republicans, but what is a left-leaning Republican? Well, that's a Democrat. I like that we're talking about separating base budgets into line items. I think that's a good idea. I think that would be great. Yes, that means that our representatives would have more things to vote on, but also that
makes it more transparent.
It makes it way more transparent. And also, then if you have people clamoring for, I don't know, defund the police, you can actually bring up something and be like, all right, we're defunding the police. Here you go. Here's the thing that you asked for. Or
right.
Maybe not that one specifically, but with other such items, it makes sense to me. Transparency is always a good thing. You brought up the, Omnibus Prime, and I think that is one of the problems that our, at least federal government has. I don't know how much our state legislature has to deal with omnibus packages and pork in bills. I would hope they don't have to, because I would hope that that's not a thing that our local politicians would want to deal with.
I mean, on that, here again, as best as I've understood it and seen it and watching stuff over last year's legislature and this one, there aren't a lot of stuff that are pork-wise. The budget bills are the one thing, which I'm glad to see that there's kind of some efforts trying to streamline those and make it more transparent, because money stuff is so complex. It's so confusing. There again, shameless plug for the interview with Nicholas Kleinworth. And so anything we can try to do to make that process more understandable for the common person to then keep the representative accountable, I think is a great thing. But the one thing that I feel like that rears its head a lot more at the local state level and sometimes a lot at the county level is things getting lost in committees where, oh, cool, it passed the House and then it gets lost in some committee for the Senate. Or it passed the Senate and then it got lost in a committee for the House or something, where committees a lot of times can be those places where things bog down and get lost and stuff. Not to say I'm against committees. If someone's going to go clip this out or something like that, I'm not saying that at all. They have their place.
Yeah, that was something I thought was interesting with your conversation with Nicholas was when he talked about that there are bills that just get drawered and you never hear from again. And sometimes I want to believe it's an honest mistake and somebody passes it, it comes to the committee talks about it, it gets tabled, and then just other stuff takes up the rest of their time and they never get back to it. That's my hope with some of these things. The reality, I think, is that a lot of bills that would actually change things end up getting drawered.
Purposefully.
Yeah. They're intentionally, accidentally put away.
Right. Which, there again, shameless encouragement for everyone out there, and I have no doubt probably the person listening to this is doing this, but if you're not, this is another example I would highly encourage you. You don't need to keep it with it all. You can listen to here. You can listen to the Idaho Freedom Foundation. There's a couple really great resources out there, but at least just be involved with your representative. That if there's a bill that you see that we talk about on here or you read about and you're really passionate that you want it to keep moving, just regularly send them an email and be like, hey, how's it going with that bill? Because either if you're showing that persistence, that you're wanting that and you're interested in that and showing that public support, a lot of times senators or our representatives, they'll go and be like, hey, what's going on with this? I'm getting people asking, where is it at? And it makes it a lot harder to table or mothball bills.
Yeah.
But in any case, some good stuff. Very glad to hear it. Like we said, commendable to those legislatures that stood with what they believed on, right? That ran on that we can't be spending like crazy. We need to be responsible adults with our money, and we need to be transparent with our constituents. So glad on you. It sounds like it's been a crazy week there, and now you get to reap the rewards of that, hopefully, and us as Idahoans as a whole with some more, hopefully, transparent and responsible spending.